The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Today is Thursday, February 2nd, 2023. Thank you so much for joining me. It appears as though 2024 is going to be a competition between who can be the bigger fascist, Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis. Donald Trump has released a new campaign video from his quote-unquote war room, and, well, it is eerily reminiscent of an early Adolf Hitler speech. The energy, the tone, the intensity with which he is targeting Nazis. The overwhelming theme of it, I'm going to play it for you, portion by portion. It's about 5 minutes long, so I'm going to break it up so we can actually break down what's going on here, because he's making very specific talking points that are carefully curated by his consultants in order to out-fascist Ronald DeSantis. That being the case, we are looking at 2024 being about who can out-fascist the other, Ronald DeSantis or Donald Trump. Here's the first part.
Our public schools have been taken over by the radical left maniacs. Here is my plan to save American education and restore power to American parents. First, we will cut federal funding for any school or program pushing critical race theory, gender ideology, or other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content onto our children. We're not going to allow it to happen. Next, I will direct the Department of Justice and Education to open civil rights investigations into any school district that has engaged in race-based discrimination. That includes discrimination against Asian Americans.
Okay, let me work backwards on this one. Here, Donald Trump is appealing to, honestly, one person, Edward Blum, who is at the center of the current affirmative action cases that are before the Supreme Court. These cases are ostensibly about alleged discrimination against Asian American students as a result of affirmative action policies, which give universities the ability to look at Black and Latino and white women, quite honestly, and give them preference in admissions because of historic discrimination against all those groups. I throw in white women because white women are by far the greatest recipients and beneficiaries of affirmative action. But this is not how it plays out in the American discourse. In our discourse, it is seen as another form of welfare for Black people. And because there's nothing that these white devils love more, I just have to cut to the core. There's nothing that these white Christian devils want more. There you go. That's how I'll deliver that payload. There's nothing that these white conservative Christian devils want more than to play on the racial animus that lies in the heart of so many white Americans. And so instead of admitting that white women are the greatest beneficiaries of affirmative action, they are willing to use it as a prop, as a tool to destroy any opportunity that a Black person would get because they are Black as a result of the crime and the sin of this nation towards Black people. God forbid that this nation does something for Black people because we are Black. That's anathema to this country. Well, at least to white people like Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis and Edward Blum. In fact, there are more Asian Pacific Islander students who support affirmative action than oppose it. 70% support affirmative action as it exists today. Even worse, the two cases that are before the Supreme Court right now, they don't even have plaintiffs that are Asian American or Asian. The plaintiff is a white man, Edward Blum. And so here Donald Trump is appealing to this guy specifically, but broader, in a more broader sense, he's appealing to anyone who is triggered, any snowflake white Christian devil who is triggered by the word affirmative action in the same way they're triggered by the word critical race theory, which he began with. Who's going to define critical race theory specifically? Because if we can't define a thing, how do you know that you're opposed to it? Well, in America, in the year of our Lord 2023, we are dealing with an entire group of Neanderthals who don't need a specific definition because they enjoy the ability of using it and applying it to anything that they dislike, such is the definition or the lack thereof for the word woke. That's what's going on in that first 30 seconds alone. Here's the next part.
The Marxism being preached in our schools is also totally hostile to Judeo-Christian teachings, and in many ways it's resembling an established new religion. Can't let that happen. For this reason, my administration will aggressively pursue potential violations of the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause of the Constitution. That's very simple.
Well, let's be sure Donald Trump has no idea what he just read in the teleprompter, because he said it's that simple. And you can tell where he ad-libbed versus where he actually read what his white consultants wrote for him. I'll deal with that a little bit later. But what he's talking about specifically here is using the Department of Justice as a weapon against anyone who teaches anything that can be labeled woke ideology, anything that could be labeled, again, critical race theory, anything that talks about race. If you get as specific as Ron DeSantis in the state of Florida in the Stop Woke Act, is regarding anything that makes a white person uncomfortable. And as we all know, having to confront the fact that their founding fathers and their beloved ancestors were savage and barbarians is pretty difficult and uncomfortable. But I'm sorry if your ancestors were the ones who committed genocide. If that makes you uncomfortable, then perhaps start a new legacy of reversing everything that your ancestors did. That is what they specifically want to target. And he's looking to use the Free Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause as a way of creating investigations into. It won't even take a full-blown investigation. As we see in the state of Florida, merely threatening, using the Stop Woke Act and merely threatening the diversity and inclusion programs across the country, across the state, Ron DeSantis was effectively able to shut them all completely down. Take a look at what's happening in the state of Florida, and every diversity and inclusion program is being dismantled because of Ron DeSantis. And here Donald Trump is trying to escalate that and make it a campaign promise. He's trying to out-fascist Ron DeSantis by saying, I'm going to do it at the federal level using the Department of Justice. Number one, go back to what he said at the beginning.
The Marxism being preached in our schools is also totally hostile to Judeo-Christian teachings, and in many ways it's resembling an established new religion.
Enter the Free Establishment Clause. The inability or the constraint on the federal government of establishing a national religion. And because they are now using the argument that the woke ideology, which they cannot define, is tantamount to being an established religion that is hostile to Judeo-Christian values, which now means it infringes on someone's free exercise clause. He is going to use that as a premise to completely eviscerate the ability to ever discuss the sins of white Christian devils in this country and the aftermath of what it did to black and indigenous populations in this country.
Can't let that happen. For this reason, my administration will aggressively pursue potential violations of the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause of the Constitution. That's very simple.
You see where he improvised? You see where Donald Trump absolutely doesn't know what he's talking about? But what's important are that his consultants that surround him understand the score of 2023 and 2024. The score is this. They have to out-fascist Ron DeSantis because there's enough blood in the water in this nation right now such that the Republican Party can legitimately run a presidential campaign on fascism. That's where we are. And this is why you have this hard pivot. As disgusting as Donald Trump has already always been. He has escalated now to say, I want to outdo Ron DeSantis as the bigger fascist. Continuing on.
Additionally, on day one, we will begin to find and remove the radical zealots and Marxists who have infiltrated the federal Department of Education. And that also includes others, and you know who you are, because we're not going to allow anybody to hurt our children. Joe Biden has given these lunatics unchecked power. I will have them fired and escorted from the building, and I will tell Congress that any appropriations bill I sign must reaffirm the president's ability to remove defiant employees from the job. It's all about our children.
Again, he's improvising there. It's all about our children, because the focus there is making a clear threat to individuals in the Department of Education. He's going to label them later on as pink-haired Marxists. But here, this speech is making a direct threat to anyone in the Department of Education. Or rather, let me rephrase that. He's actually going to cut a little deeper. They're going to use the power of the Department of Education, which has historically been able to use its strength to compel states to stop them from discriminating. The way the Department of Education actually works, the way federalism actually works, is that the federal government persuades states to act right through the purse strings, through the budget, by denying them access to a certain amount of funds if they don't conform to certain rules. If you want the money, then you have to conform to these federal guidelines. And this is what Donald Trump is talking about when he wants to strike at the Department of Education. He wants to use it as now, instead of a tool that is going to use the purse strings as a rod to whip these racists into proper behavior. They're going to use it now as a tool to hurt states that teach about racism. Anything about racism. Anything that they can remotely connect to woke ideology. They're even banning Martin Luther King at this point.
I will veto the sinister effort to weaponize civics education. We will keep men out of women's sports, and we will create a new credentialing body that will be the gold standard anywhere in the world to certify teachers who embrace patriotic values, support our way of life, and understand that their job is not to indoctrinate children, but very simply to educate them.
Okay, you understand what he's doing there, right? Using the word patriotic as if that is not indoctrination itself. Right. We understand anytime we hear the word patriotic in the United States of America, it is inextricably linked to a very racist, white supremacist mindset. It's tied to the Republican Party because they fancy themselves as being people who love America more than the rest of us, when in reality, they only love America to the extent that it can benefit them. See now how they are all betraying America in exchange for their new love for Vladimir Putin. So they are not actually patriots. They don't love America. They are willing to burn America to the ground. They are willing to go into a second. They already had their first civil war. These are the descendants of the Confederacy. This is exactly what we're dealing with. They didn't go anywhere. Their kids and their grandkids and their great-grandchildren are still mad that they lost the Civil War, and this is them coming back using a New York elitist former Democrat who pretends to be a Republican. Oh, but don't worry. They've got them a Southern man. They got them a true Confederate loving, pro-slavery, pro-Confederate teaching, former teacher in the state of Georgia, Ron DeSantis. They've got them a real Southern man now. This is why Donald Trump has to work that much harder. Let's continue on.
Finally, I will implement massive funding preferences and favorable treatment for all states and school districts that make the following historic reforms in education. 1, abolish teacher tenure for grades K through 12 so we can remove bad teachers and adopt merit pay to reward good teachers. We want great teachers in our schools. 2, drastically cut the bloated number of school administrators, including the costly, divisive, and unnecessary diversity, equity, and inclusion bureaucracy. 3, adopt a parental bill of rights that includes complete curriculum transparency and a form of universal school choice. And 4, implement the direct election of school principals by the parents. It's all about the parents for their children. More than anyone else, parents know what their children need. If any principal is not getting the job done, the parents should be able to vote to fire them and select someone who will. This will be the ultimate form of local control. Our country has, frankly, never had anything like it, or let's say for at least the last 50 years. As the saying goes, personnel is policy, and at the end of the day, if we have pink-haired communists teaching our kids, we have a major problem. When I'm president, we will put parents back in charge and give them the final say. We will get back to teaching reading, writing, and math, called arithmetic, and we will give our kids the high-quality, pro-American education they deserve.
Okay, I know that section was long, but I want you to really grasp what he's saying and what the conservative movement is signaling. They're signaling that they have a new method of circumventing federalism that benefits anyone other than white people. And the way they can accomplish it is by leveraging the exact system against progress, the way the system has been leveraged against racism and discrimination. Now, I want to put a pin here. We haven't even actually gotten liberation in this country. Black people are still at the bottom of every single economic indicator, but these white Christian devils have lost their minds so much so wrapped up in their hatred that they're not only willing to shoot themselves in the foot by getting rid of the thing that benefits white women the most, which is affirmative action, but they're doing so because it enables them to exercise their racism in a very magnificent way. It gives them a way to penalize everyone who ever benefited from a moment of recompense. Affirmative action was nothing but a brief moment of recompense. But I digress. The point is this: the conservative movement is signifying that they are absolutely poised to flip this machine, this federal machine that used the federal purse strings as a method of enticing and inducing certain behavior from the states. They're now ready to flip it on its head and use that same mechanism to punish anyone who dares to do anything the system used to try to do in terms of liberation and justice and equality and integration. The system never fully accomplished it, but just a fleeting second of it. And these white Christian devils got up in arms and are now in front of the Supreme Court attacking the very thing that benefits their white women the most. This is how twisted and sadistic this entire conservative Christian thing is in this country. And Donald Trump's advisors absolutely know that that's how they have to play this particular game in order to beat Ron DeSantis in 2024, because the fangs of fascism have come out. They are ready. They are ready to go full force into their new era of McCarthyism. They're ready to go full force into their new Inquisition. They are ready to take us back to a time where the only people who had power were white Christian conservative men and the ancillary group of conspirators, co-conspirators that work alongside of them. We've got some difficult days ahead. I want you to listen to this exchange between Representative Maxine Waters of California and Representative Guy Reschenthaler from Pennsylvania, a Republican, who went after Maxine Waters during a House Rules Committee hearing on the resolution that we covered yesterday, the one that they insist is the necessary tool to condemn communism and socialism in all its forms, But again, we understand that this is merely a prelude to the attack on Social Security and Medicare. And most of all, keep in mind, this is a prelude. Listen to this clip and listen to how they are going back to the era of McCarthyism. When we heard Trump talking about rooting out the Marxists, I want you to listen now to the framing of this question of Representative Guy Reschenthaler when he's trying to, I guess, slam Maxine Waters, who took him to task. She's brilliant in this exchange. Listen in.
The fact that this isn't passing on suspension just says everything about my friends across the aisle, that you can't condemn socialism. I mean, in your opening remarks, you were talking about Putin, Kim Jong-un, and Xi. You know what they all have in common, right?
Trump.
Trump? North Korea, China, and Russia?
He loves Kim Jong-un.
That's quite the intellectual leap. I would say communism.
Actually, what he just did was the intellectual bad faith leap. What she did was simply turn his question on the head because, yeah, Donald Trump has expressed flattering remarks about each of those people that the Republican Party is now trying to attack.
That's quite the intellectual leap. I would say communism. Would you like to denounce any communist leaders?
Well, I don't know what you're asking, but let me just... The leader of the Republican Party, Donald Trump, has made often glowing, described authoritarians like Kim Jong-un, who is condemned in the resolution. Regarding North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, Trump said, Kim wrote me beautiful letters, and they're great letters, and we fell in love. You sure you want to hear the rest of this?
Sister Maxine Waters, Auntie Maxine, you sure you want to hear the rest of this? No, he doesn't. But I want to bring your attention to how he framed the question. Do you want to condemn any other socialist Marxist leader?
Would you like to denounce any communist leaders?
This is McCarthyism. The new game that's being played is an old game that they have mastered before, they being conservatives. They know the art of making the American people afraid of something and then going after their political enemies with that imagined chimera, that made up thing, that Bigfoot, the boogeyman that's hiding behind every corner. And who's the boogeyman now? The LGBTQIA community. Anything black, which they label as woke or CRT, and anything remotely socialist, like Social Security.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and get twice the content and unfiltered interviews without any of the commercial interruptions. Welcome back to The Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Later on today, I'll be speaking with the family of Dominique Brodus. I covered his death and his birthday, his death at the hands of a white man who got away with killing him, only served 1 year for obstruction of justice and tampering with evidence. I'll be speaking with his family, his father, Dominique Sr., along with the father of Ahmaud Arbery, and we will be discussing not only that case, but discussing gun violence in the state of Florida, specifically because of stand your ground laws, in addition to Ron DeSantis's new push to make so-called, quote unquote, constitutional carry the law of the land of the state of Florida without any requirement for any licensing, gun license, any training, anything. The state of Florida is hurtling towards the point to become the 26th state to allow for permitless concealed carry. This is going to clearly escalate the number of deaths that we experience in this country from gun violence. And this is what we have to conclude that they actually want. They are not going, listen, this system gets what it wants. Of course, it wants the profits, but at the end of the day, They look at the violence and the mayhem that's caused by their weapons, and they see the children who are killed by gun violence every year by mistake, by accidentally discharging a gun, and they simply bat an eye at it. This is when I talked about yesterday about this country being under the control of very evil people. You have to understand that they know the numbers of children who are killed every year from gun violence. We're not even talking about mass shootings. I'm talking about accidental deaths. And now Florida is pushing the envelope even further. To what end? To honor the Second Amendment? No, because the Second Amendment says there will be a well-regulated militia. Militia, the key word that they ignore, that all of these so-called originalists ignore. But it's beyond that. It's not a question of constitutional rights. It's 100% a question of satisfying gun manufacturers and making it so much easier for their profits to increase. Now they don't have to worry about the very arduous task of, it's not even difficult to get a permit. But that's too much. They want to be able to flood our streets with weapons with minimum accountability, minimal regulations, no regulations. We live in a society that is committed to the barrel of a gun more than to the life. They claim to be pro-life. They are the greatest death cult in the history of this planet because they are willing to throw their children directly into it. And that shouldn't surprise us when we consider the for-profit healthcare system in this country. I'll be talking about it at great lengths. There's a new ProPublica study that's showing the number of Americans who get their insurance claims denied. It's at an alarming rate. I mean, it's beyond alarming. It is sadistic. We live in a country that prioritizes the value of shareholders and prioritizes the profits of CEOs and corporations to the detriment of life itself. And we are told that this is the gold standard. When they talk about when Donald Trump and his co-conspirators, they're treasonous insurrectionists, when they talk about patriotism, they clearly define it in their heart, the freedom to exploit as many people as they possibly can. And if you say anything about it, then you're woke. That's what this is about. They want the liberty to exploit you and me. And the masses, doesn't matter how much death it causes. It doesn't matter if they deny you a claim that's going to get you killed, deny a health claim that's going to lead to your death. Never mind, insulin should never have cost what it costed. But now we're talking about gaping holes in coverage for people who need insulin the most. Never mind that those people so many of them are going to die needlessly. This is the country that we live in. This is the planet. This is not just the United States of America. This is the sentiment across the globe. America just happens to be the greatest example. This is what this country is, the land of the free or on. The one place that we are truly the land of the free is in that this is the country where you are absolutely free to exploit millions of people, hundreds of millions of people with minimum government interference. And that's what they define as freedom. And anyone who stands up against it is woke. That's the country we live in. And anywhere around the globe, you see where they try to moderate the excesses of capitalistic greed. They don't get rid of capitalism, but they will create their own version of universal health care so that at least everyone can get access to it. Here in the United States, it's like, no, not only are we going to leave about 26 million people completely uninsured, we're going to make an Affordable Care Act that actually at the end of the day, because of the games the Republicans played, made it unaffordable, despite the fact that the construct of it itself is a conservative structure, far from socialist. But now that they're going after all things socialism, they're even going to go after the biggest giveaway to the healthcare industry. Oh, we've got a lot to talk about in the Patrons Only episode. Patreon.com/the BPD show. Everyone else, I'll see you tomorrow.